Welcome back to the 150K podcast. I'm your host, Joe Graham, where we help take your dreams to six figures and beyond. Today, I have with me April from Light Beamers, and she was trying to tell me how to say her last name, but I think I'm going to butcher it. So, April, if you can tell us your last name, a little bit about yourself. I know we met at George Bryant's event. We've known each other, I think, about a year now, but if you can give us a little bit of your background, that would be awesome.
Yeah, I have one of those names that is like when you see it spelled out, it's one of those names that nobody can pronounce. And so oftentimes I just say exactly what you did. I'm April from Light Beamers.
There we go. Perfect.
Because it's one of those names. But my name is April Adams Pertuis. Officially, that's who I am. And yes, I am from Light Beamers. And I work in the world of storytelling. I've been a career-long storyteller. I've been in the industry for 30 years. Yes, I'm telling my age, but that's okay. I have been a journalist, a video producer, a digital storyteller for most of my career. And about 7 years ago, I started and transitioned my business, Light Beamers, into the online space. And I decided at that point, I had spent all of my career telling other people's stories, doing it for them, basically, that I wanted to really show people the value of storytelling and to teach them how to tell their story, not do it for them, but to empower them and equip them by way of going on the journey with them to dig into their story. I primarily work with a lot of women. I have a passion around empowering women, and I do have a lot of women in my community who are on that journey with me, going through really discovering the power of their story and the importance of sharing their story. There's a lot of people, all of us actually, we all have things in our story that we feel can be like an Achilles heel. And I love to show people how to take that and make it a superpower. So that's pretty much what I do in a nutshell.
No, and I love that. So, I am a little bit of a sci-fi nerd, and I don't know if you've watched Doctor Who before, but he says we're all stories in the end, make it a good one. And
Yeah.
I love the power of storytelling. So I do sales, been doing sales for years, and I found
Yeah.
that people can relate to stories and parables. A
Yep.
lot of people that listen to my show are like first-time entrepreneurs, sales professionals, people like that. So maybe they're not to the point, maybe they're like kind of the people you deal with where they have a story, but they don't know how to tell it. How do you start to get people to unwind that story? Because sometimes I think they think, well, if I tell this, I'm going to be embarrassed or whatever. But sometimes that can be the greatest asset for them too.
It totally can. And I often say that if there's a piece of your story that you're feeling uncomfortable sharing, that is a piece of your story worth exploring. And I do not mean that you have to share your story in a way that spills your guts or shares dirty laundry or throws other people under the bus, all of those things that we hear. It's not about that. It's really learning to use your story and use those pieces of your story that might be feeling a little uncomfortable or a little icky, or things that maybe you're not as proud of, as teachable moments, and talk about the rest of the story. So a lot of times when people aren't wanting to share their story, they're stuck in a stage of their story.
Yeah.
And they haven't gotten to what I call the other side of that story, which the other side usually is there. So unless people are still in the thick of their journey and the thick of that particular story, and they don't really know what the other side is yet. But a lot of times people have already been through the story enough that there is the other side. And I teach a really simple formula. I mean, it's storytelling, all good storytelling is told in threes. That's a really great kind of trick to remember. So if you're ever giving a presentation for sales or you're delivering a talk, you want to think about three main key pieces of your story that you want to share. And I love to break them down into a story that's going to provide you the opportunity to tell a transformation, right? That's really the type of storytelling that I focus on and that I have expertise in, is transformational storytelling. And what that just means is that we're going to tell a story that's going to take the audience on a journey, right?
Yep.
So the three parts, I'm going to make it super easy and simple to remember the three parts of a really great story. And it's kind of like, it's the middle, the beginning, the middle, and the end, but the beginning is your before. So oftentimes the before is where we do experience those things that cause us a little bit of, that pain, if you will, and struggle. Some of the areas that you'll often find your before is areas of frustration, pain, disappointment, failure, depression, like all kinds of stuff like that. That's like, and a lot of people will say when they have that in their story, well, I don't want to tell that story. That's depressing, or that's like not uplifting, or what's the benefit? I don't want to go and relive that story again. And this is what I mean by you have to get to the other side. That's just one piece of your story. That was just your before, right? And so when people have pain, setbacks, failure, disappointments, heartache, all of those things, there's something that comes after that. And the question is, well, how did you get out of that? Or how did you transform? How did life change for you? How did business change for you? So this is a very practical tool, this formula that I'm sharing for business storytelling as well, is taking the journey from what it was for you before to this transformative period or moment where things started to change. That's what a transformation is. It's the butterfly that goes from being the caterpillar to sprouting wings, right? That's a transformation. Your story has those transformative moments in it as well. So you want to look for those. So you want to look for your before, of where the pain points were, the struggle, the disappointments, all of those things. And then what was the transformative moment or series of events or season of life in which you experience that transformation. Once we experience transformation, that's the second piece. Then we get to the third piece, which is the other side of the story, which is what I've been talking about, right? When you're on the other side of that transformation, then you can really look back on that before and have perspective. You can appreciate it from a place of like, oh, now I get it, or I had to go through that journey so that I could learn this lesson, or that I could, have this awareness. And, a lot of times pain is a teacher. And so that story on the other side is really where you have a message to share with other people, right? Which is why the story should be told, because if we just hold it into ourselves, then the story was almost for nothing. Yes, you learned something by it, but that story could be so beneficial to share with someone else at that point, because then that's when the story really does get to be the teacher, right? And it also releases the power of that story it releases the nature of that story having power over you. When you start sharing it with other people, and the whole tagline for Light Beamers is when you share your stories, you shine a light. When you share your story with other people, then other people can learn or get inspired or get wisdom or whatever they need from you, from your story. And now that story has done exactly that. It shined a light for someone else, and it's no longer about you. It's no longer your story. It gives the story power, and a power in a really beautiful way.
Yeah. And I think, because you hit on a lot of really key points. And I think the biggest thing, a lot of people in the beginning, they have that ego. They want to put this persona up of I'm super successful. I've done this, I've done. And I'm thinking back even in my own life, like I'm very successful in sales now, but I'm successful because I went through all the failures and the different things I had to. When I started out in sales, because I'm just like playing this in my head when you were saying that, the first guy I talked to, I told him I couldn't do this. And I tried to walk out of the house. He goes, bro, I'm going to buy anyway. We're good. Like literally, I was that bad to now I'm talking to CEOs and CFOs about hundreds of thousands of dollar contracts. But if I would have never went through that process, and now I can tell you about the story. So like, I love that concept of it. How do you help people get past the I don't want to look bad stage? Because I think that's really what it is. It's ego, at least from my point of view. Maybe not ego, but they're just like, well, if I tell them that I screwed up, you know what I mean? Though, if I tell them I screwed up or I did this, are they going to look down on me? But I think in reality, they look up to you because like, wait a minute, I can relate to April now.
Totally. That's the relatability factor, is that when you take yourself off of a pedestal, people can actually see you and connect with you. And ultimately, that's what we want. If we're trying to stand up on that pedestal, we're also just trying to be seen and heard, right? So We get it wrong. The perception is that we have to elevate ourselves. We have to only tell the resume version of our story. We don't actually tell the gritty parts, and we're getting it all wrong. And that's why we have a world that feels very disconnected.
Mhm.
That's why we have social media that drives people crazy, because this is why I started Like Beamers. I saw social media and I was like, oh, no. I got to go teach people how to tell stories the right way. Because if we're going to just create personas online of perfection, then we're screwed, So
Yes, we
I
are.
knew I had to take what I know in my area of expertise to try to do better. And so what I have in my experience personally, and also with all the people that I work with, that when they get that right, when they put it in the right order and they bring themselves off this high horse pedestal of just being the guru, being the expert, being the know-it-all, being the person that's perfect, and they start to kind of peel back the curtain and show the real story and the real journey. Like you saying, I sucked at sales on day one. I almost walked out of my first deal because I thought it was horrible.
I did.
And
Yeah.
right. But
Yep.
that was the grit, and you probably didn't feel so great about that experience. I mean, and that's the thing about what stories do, is it allows us to tell an experience and then how that experience made us feel. And that's kind of like a ninja trick of storytelling, is always weave in, like always answer this question: how did that make you feel?
Yep.
So when you're telling a story, be asking yourself, okay, how did that make me feel? And then tell how that made you feel, because that's when the audience can actually connect with you even deeper, because now they may not have been through your exact experience. Like I may not have been through an experience where I wanted to run out of, the appointment because I felt like I was doing so bad, in a sales situation. Although I think we kind of all can relate to that. I think we've all had those moments in our life. But, I may not have had that exact experience, but if you tell me more about how that made you feel, like, oh, I felt totally like I was screwed it up. I was inadequate. I sucked at sales. I was never going to be able to do this. Like, I know what that feeling feels like, to feel like that I sucked at something, that I was totally ill prepared, that I got it all wrong. I know what that feels like. So when we start to weave in the emotion, we're starting to speak a universal language, and that helps us connect deeper with that audience. But you're absolutely right. People, and especially business owners and professionals, right? As business leaders, we want to put our best foot forward. Of course we do. We want our expertise to shine. We want people to see us as the expert and the guru who actually can help them. And the best way to have that happen is to show them and tell them when that wasn't you.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
So that they can appreciate where you are now, and they see that you really are a great guide, leader, coach, consultant, person, whatever it is for them to work with.
I think that's one of the secrets that most of the flash in the pan people miss. They try to always show, I did this, I did this, I did that, and no one relates with them.
Yeah.
And if you are vulnerable and open up, it's like the reverse kingdom almost. Instead of showing that you're the man or you're the woman, you're literally like, look, I've dealt with what you've dealt with. I've gone through this, but now I found a way to get through. And I think it just gives you more credibility.
It does. It totally gives you more credibility. Absolutely. Yeah. And so that's like what storytelling can do for people, and why I'm always trying to get people to use it more, think about it more. I just met this week with a client of mine. It's a large real estate company. Large in terms of my local area. They have about 250 agents and in my local area. And they bringing me in to help them with storytelling. And I asked them, I'm like, well, why aren't you telling stories now? Like, what's stopping you? And they're like, we just never think about it. We just don't ever stop and think, oh, that's a story worth telling. And I think that that's where a lot of people are. I think that most business owners and leaders and go-getters and people who weren't really trained, to do this, don't think about it. They don't stop to think, wow, that's actually a really good story to tell. Maybe that would be something that would help me connect with my audience more. We're oftentimes more in the tactical, right? The get shit done kind of thing.
Yep.
And we miss the moments of storytelling that actually can help do so much heavy lifting in our businesses and help us with sales. The stories are what's going to get people.
Well, because people buy because they like you, they trust you, and they relate with you. If you're just
Yeah.
transactional with them, they're going to read that. And I think
Big.
you mentioned that as a super key. You have to be relationship. Well, how do you build relationships? You tell stories. We used to do this for thousands of years. I do make this joke, and I do write a little bit of science fiction and fantasy on the side, so I like stories. But I would be the old dude sitting by the fire telling the stories if it was 1,000 years ago. That would be what I'd want to do. But I think that a lot of times we get so caught up in, I need to get the sale, I need to do this. Well, if we get so caught up in how can I help you, what story can I tell to make you relate, you're going to get so much farther ahead.
Absolutely. And that's why I say the storytelling piece can do some of the heavy lifting for you so that you don't have to be so rushed and feel pressure by saying the right thing, like going back to your first sales appointment. And I'm sure you were focused on all the wrong things at the time. You were focused on making the sale, focused on saying it right, getting
focus on the clipboard, flipping.
Yeah, whatever the next thing was that you needed to say on the checklist, instead of just actually being in conversation with your prospect.
So how do you help people get, like, say they're more of a process-oriented person? Because there's different types of people. How do you help someone that they want to tell a story, but they don't really feel comfortable with it because their mind works with it? How do you help them start to craft a story that works for them?
Well, I mean, that's the formula that I shared with the before, the transformation, the other side is foundational. That's what I go into every piece of storytelling work that I do with clients, because that formula, like, you can put it to the test. It will help you cover every type of storytelling that you have that you need to tell. I've yet to find a type of story that it wouldn't work for. Think about client testimonials or case studies in your business. Boom. Where were they before? What was the transformation they experienced? And what do they have to say now? Right? Like, that's it. And so for people who are very structured and process oriented, there you go. There's the formula. There's the secret. You don't even have to hire me. I just gave it to you. So that's it. But it's really so much more. The structure is helpful. It is absolutely helpful. But the real work, Joe, comes from up here, right? The reason why people aren't telling stories is less about, I don't know how to tell a story, because we can fix that in about 5 seconds, right? I just did. I just fixed it for you right now. The real problem, the real reason why people don't share stories is we get in our head and we think, this is what I hear. My story's not good enough. It won't matter. They'll think I'm crazy. I'll be a turnoff to them. It's too boring. It won't make an impact. Or it's too crazy and I'll run people off. Like, they'll think that it's just got too much in it. And so there's all of this underlying self-doubt and self-belief that we've got going on. And so story work, when you really want to dig into it and you really want to figure out what's stopping you, it is not at all about mechanics or processes. It is about an inner, something that's going on in our mindset and an inner belief. And so this is why, I always say storytelling, when we go on the storytelling journey, you're going to increase your confidence. You're going to increase your self-worth because you're going to find it. You're going to dig into that story and realize the story does make an impact. The story is important. The story is worth sharing and others will be connected to it. It will matter to someone else. It's not too messy to share. It's not too boring to share. I have literally spent my entire adult life. I literally graduated in my 20s from journalism school and went to work day one. And I've been doing this for 30 years. And I have interviewed literally thousands of people, because that's been my work. I sit and talk to people all day long and I interview them. Never, ever have I walked away from an interview and said, well, that was a waste of my time. That person doesn't have a story. Never. Everybody has a story and every story is worth sharing and every story has a reason. And I'm going to get spiritual on you, but I really believe that this is actually how God works through us. And so I believe that those stories were divinely orchestrated. And so that's not an accident. So even things that have happened to us in our past that are the pain and the shame and the blame and all those things that we carry around, it's because we're being guided to use that for a higher purpose and for good, for the betterment of humankind.
Yeah.
So I feel very, very passionate about this. Is not, we've got to move people from a place of lacking self-worth and belief in themselves, and storytelling can have a big role in that.
No, and I agree. And I think maybe we should go a little bit into, I think sometimes people aren't ready to share because they get stuck in their story or where they're at instead of going through it.
Sure.
Maybe they come through a little bit, but have you helped people in that area as well, like self-care or mindset or that type of stuff? And just to give you a little bit more credibility for them, she's been on HGTV. You've been on like a bunch of different stuff. If you check her track record, she's done a bunch of crazy stuff that you would be blown away. So I want to make sure you know that, because I didn't mention it in the intro. But if you can tell people a little bit more about like mindset and all that type of stuff that you've helped people with.
Yeah, I think it's innate, right? Like when we go on this journey together of picking out the pieces of your story that matter, a lot of times that's why people do hire someone like me, because it is hard to pick it out for yourself. Even though I give you the formula, I say, go find your before, your transformation, and your other side. That's a lot easier said than done. You know, so having someone to sit with you that has that third party viewer perspective, like I don't have an attachment to your story. So I can actually just listen to your story and receive it. I don't have an attachment to it. So I help, really what I do is just hold up a mirror for my client to see that story from my lens, right? From a neutral lens. And when they start to see it and detach themselves from it as well, then that's when they can see the value, the worth, the credibility, the importance of it all. So the mindset piece is something that just happens naturally. By no means am I a therapist, although I've been called one. People are like, April, this is like therapy. I'm like, I know, I get told that all the time, but I don't have I'm not a clinical licensed psychologist or any of those things. But what I know is what I know from my experience of doing this work for so long and having talked to so many people, that I've just become naturally a student of human behavior. And you can't do something for 30 years and not notice patterns.
Right.
And the patterns they all repeat themselves. I mean, there's about 5 different stories basically we're all sharing in this universe. There really not that many different stories. We're all kind of in that same cycle of life. And it's the same stories over and over again. So that mental piece comes from doing that deeper work on the story. A lot of times people will come when they're feeling super stuck, like, I just don't know what my next thing is, or I'm not sure what my life purpose is, and all of those things. And I'll say to them, it's hidden. The breadcrumbs are in your story. Let's go dig into your story and find it out. My own story, I would not be able to be here today doing this work had I not dug into my own story to figure out why I'm supposed to be here doing this work, right? It wouldn't make sense to me otherwise. And so I had to dig into my own story to see, once again, what was the path that I was being guided to go on, and why did certain things happen to me not to me, for me, along the way, right? Why did that happen? And what was the point of it all? I had to go learn certain lessons early on so that I could sit in the seat that I sit in today.
Yeah, no, and I love that.
Yeah. And so other people can find their same point towards their North Star by being more reflective, right? We don't need to go seek more outside validation. We need to be looking inside.
Yeah. Well, and you mentioned a few more things that just like popped out at me. Like, you sometimes need someone outside of you to look at you to see, because you see yourself through your lenses of your faults, the stuff you deal with, the things inside internally, and they'll look at you and go, no, I see this, this, and this. And you're like, really? So you need someone to do that. And then I love the part where you said, dig into your story, go back in and see where it is that you're at, that you're trying. Why are you brought to this point? You know what I mean? Why are you at this point here? What is it that you're able to share?